Hey everybody, this is Ben from I Drink Your Podcast, and before we jump into this week's episode, I just wanted to provide a quick update on some stuff that's been going on with us recently. As you probably noticed, Wesley's been absent the past several episodes, and we have been making statements wishing him well and to get better. So around the end of May, Wesley started showing symptoms of liver issues. After spending a week in the hospital going through testing, he was able to go home. However, not long after that, his kidneys began failing. Doctors diagnosed him with end-stage liver disease, and it became apparent that he would need a liver transplant. Testing revealed that he was so sick that he would be at the top of the transplant list, and thankfully in mid-July, they found a new liver for him and were able to complete the transplant. Wesley's responding well to the new liver and is currently in the hospital undergoing PT and testing and getting the rest and care that he needs. As for the rest of us, it's been difficult for us during this time to be excited about doing the podcast. In addition to Wesley's struggles, Emily and I both bought houses recently and are in the process of moving, and Matt is continuing to get acclimated to his new job in city. With all that said, we here at IDYP need a bit of a break, so we will not be releasing any new episodes in the month of August, but we hope to be back as a full group releasing new episodes every Monday starting the first Monday of September. Thank you everyone for your continued support of our podcast, and please enjoy this week's episode, Lust Caution.
Welcome to I Drink Your Podcast, where we drink and talk about movies from 2007.
The fourth dimension will collapse upon itself, you stupid bitch.
Shut up, I'm a man and I know what's good for me.
Bountiful penis. Amen.
Boy, my ass is sore.
You can get pink eye from farting in a pillow?
Yeah, but you gotta be bare-assed.
I'm gonna invent a toothbrush for your butthole.
It does the trick.
Paddington Bear.
He's a homewrecker?
Yeah, he wrecks homes.
You are a murderer of love.
I drink your
Podcast! I drink it up!
Welcome back to another bonus episode of I Drink Your Podcast. I am Ben, and with me today is Emily.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Emily, how you doing?
I'm okay. You know, I'm here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, what's in your glass today, Emily?
Today I have a rhyme or reason. I went with a very red drink for this movie, but also in this, it has a blood orange simple syrup that I bought from a little local store, and I felt like we're going to get bloody today. So
Yeah.
I went with this drink. It's a red drink and it has blood orange in it. What about you?
Well, I leaned heavily into the title of this movie, so I went with a drink that I've been craving really bad recently, which is root beer.
Oh.
And so that's the lust part of it. And then the caution part of it is I poured a lot of root beer schnapps into it.
Oh.
So it's just root beer on root beer, meaning I could get very fucked up if I'm not careful.
Yeah, be careful, man. Be cautious. Be cautious with
But
your
be
lust
lustful.
for
Yeah.
root beer. You weirdo.
So before we jump into lust caution, Emily, what have you been watching recently?
Well, our listeners don't know this, but you have, because I've been pestering you about how excited I am about this. But as a huge Star Wars fan, I, for some reason, have never gotten to watch Clone Wars, even though I've seen Rebels, the animated series. And I finally sat down and started watching Clone Wars about a week ago, and I am on season 5. So, whoops. I guess I never really wanted to watch it just because I think I had seen a couple episodes of the first season and I was like, this isn't quite what I want. It's very episodic. It doesn't have like story arcs like the Rebels did, a little bit more so. And I also felt it was a little bit more kid show like, which I was extremely mistaken by all accounts. Once I got past season 1 and part of season 2 still, they didn't have a lot of money to do really cool stuff. But season 3 hit me and I was blown away. Like today, even I learned about General Krell for all those Star Wars listeners, and I was just like bawling by the end of that arc. So yeah, it's been a really fun ride, and I know what happens obviously with Revenge of the Sith, and I just think it's going to be way more impactful now that I'm actually working through it.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. So what have you been watching, Ben?
Well, since school's gotten out, I've done a complete rewatch of How I Met Your Mother.
Oh my God. That was like 3 weeks.
Yeah, I finished yesterday. Just some quick points about it. I think the show takes a huge dive in quality around season 5 or 6.
When's that? Is that when Robin and Barney get together?
It's when they first get together.
Mm-hmm.
So it's around the time when Zoe shows up as Ted's romantic interest.
Yeah.
I can't get behind that character or any of that. That entire season just felt very off to me. And then I hated the decision to make the entire last season like take place over one weekend. I think they were running out of creative juice, and you could clearly tell based on some of the storylines that they were throwing in there. It felt like a lot more of just like let's go back to our greatest hits and just re-hit all those jokes again. So it felt like a rehash of everything I'd already seen,
Right.
which when you've already sat down for the last 3 weeks and watched the first 8 seasons, like you don't need those callbacks because you've already experienced them. I also think that they did too good of a job casting the mother.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
Because I wanted to see so much more of her and Ted's relationship, because it finally made Ted a character I cared about, which he's the worst part of the show for like a majority of it. So I felt really cheated to just not see them together. And I think it's the quintessential example of a writer falling in love with their ending and then not caring about the character development that they've built and sticking with that ending, because the disservice they do to Barney and Robin in that last episode is just heartbreaking. That they basically have them circle back to who they were when we've seen them change over so many seasons. So that was disappointing. And I also watched Black Widow yesterday.
Ooh. Did you stay at home or go to the theaters?
I stayed at home, watched it on Disney Plus.
Okay.
It was fine.
It was fine.
It was fine. You could tell it clearly wanted to be Captain America Winter Soldier, which is a phenomenal entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it's not that, because it lacks the intrigue and the stakes. Because, I mean, if you've watched Endgame, you know Natasha's how it ends, how her story ends. So to then have to go back to fill in these blanks, it felt like a little bit, I don't know. It just felt like it was kind of lackluster, because
like they probably should have done this earlier.
Yeah, I think placing this between Civil War and Infinity War, it would have added a lot more to Natasha's ultimate fate in Endgame, and it made you care a little more.
Right.
Whereas it felt just like a little bit backtracky and more like, well, we need to figure out who's going to take the mantle of Black Widow now. And let's get the story going in that way. So that kind of sucked. But Florence Pugh and David Harbour were awesome in this movie. And the movie did have a lot of really fun fight scenes. The fight choreography was just phenomenal.
Cool.
So I'd recommend it to any Marvel fans. I would not recommend it as like, if you're not a fan of the Marvel movies, don't go see it.
Yeah, I'm more intrigued in seeing Black Widow more than ever seeing any of the Endgame Infinity War stuff. Because you know me, I haven't seen a lot of the Marvel movies past, I think, 2013, 2014 or so. I just kind of got bored with them. And I have seen like Thor Ragnarok, and I have seen a couple other ones that have come out, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy, but I've just been like, not really interested in this, because they all feel very similar to me. So I am interested in Black Widow because it just seems different.
Well, let's talk about a movie that's nothing like Black Widow, or is it like Black Widow? Because it's a spy movie.
Is Black Widow just a spy movie?
It's a
is
spy
that what
movie.
You're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's
so
not just a spy movie, but I mean, they're both spy movies. It's probably they're probably closer in similarity than I thought when I started that sentence. But we did watch Lust Caution, directed by Ang Lee, starring Tang Wei, Tony Leung Chow Wei, and Wang Li Hom. And for a little background about this movie, I decided to focus in on the fact that this movie is NC-17 rated. Emily, do you know what that means?
You know, I have no idea. I'm just assuming it's like no children under 17 or something like that.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Is it really no children? For. It's like no children? No
children 17 or under are allowed to view it, period. So this is one rating past the R rating that you typically know, where the R rating is children under 17 can attend if they're accompanied by an adult.
But wait. Past R, wasn't that X?
Yes, it was X. And in 1990, they actually changed it to NC-17 because they wanted to restore the credibility of an adults only rating because X had become synonymous with pornography.
I was wondering about that because I was like, yeah, sex.
Yeah. But they actually wanted a rating that kind of allowed for these movies that weren't safe for children, but still had the artistic merits of, not pornography. Not that porn isn't art. But,
well, Ben, I guess you've heard it here, everyone. Ben thinks porn is art.
There's some artsy porn.
Is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not going to give you any research or anything to back that statement up.
I need to just go figure it out on my own.
Go figure it out, yeah. This restoring the credibility of an adults-only rating did not work. And as a result, movies will typically do everything they can to avoid an NC-17 rating because it typically means that the movie's going to fail at the box office because theaters aren't willing to show movies with this rating.
Why? Are they just worried that people won't come see it because it's not like family friendly? Yes,
and I think having it even on your marquee, an NC-17 movie, would be enough to maybe have the stigma of, well, you're pornography related, you're pornography adjacent.
I can totally see. I've also been watching Arrested Development recently. I can totally see Anne picketing the fence or picketing the movie theater and being like, "It's porn."
Yeah, I mean, even up until 11 or 12 years ago, the R rating used to have a stigma where movies with an R rating just wouldn't open well and wouldn't get the money that they thought a movie of PG-13 rating would get. And that stigma's kind of been broken as a result of like The Hangover.
Or Deadpool. Where now it's okay to have an R rating. And in fact, movies are starting to want to get these R ratings because it's more money. It's new money. It's a different avenue of going after audiences. See, I didn't know any of that. That's really cool.
So a lot of famous movies went through re-edits to avoid the NC-17 rating. So some of them would be American Pie was originally NC-17 rated, but they edited it and reshot it to get it down to R.
And that's one of those like unrated versions that you see, especially in like the early 2000s, I'm assuming. Those DVD covers came out.
Yeah, well, unrated doesn't mean NC-17 rated.
Oh.
So unrated just means that version of the movie was not submitted to the MPAA for rating. So you could have an unrated version of Shrek that is just maybe an added fart joke. And it wouldn't make it like an R rating or something bad. It would just be, it was never submitted.
But it probably was, an R-rated Shrek.
I'm sure there's an unrated version of Shrek out there somewhere.
Yeah, you get to see...
No, I don't want to know what I get to see.
All sorts of things with Donkey and the Dragon.
No!
You're welcome.
No. Other movies would be Boondock Saints, Clerks, Pulp Fiction, and RoboCop. All were originally NC-17, yep, and then were turned back into R with edits.
I've seen RoboCop. I can't believe that's an R rating.
That was R rating for the violence, so the violence was a lot more gory and bloodier.
Maybe for the time, but... I did hear a rumor once upon a time that someone told me that Peter Pan was originally rated R. And I was like, I don't know where you're getting your information from.
The animated Disney one?
Yeah. And they were like, yeah, it's because flying and fairies, it's like the devil's work or something. Okay. I don't know what this person was on, but they were on something. Welcome to my childhood.
Right? Director Ang Lee, though, he was given the option to re-edit the film by cutting out around 10 minutes of footage and then resubmitting for an R rating, but he refused because he felt that the scenes that led to the NC-17 rating were extremely critical to the story and to the understanding of the relationships within.
So the sex scenes.
The sex scenes. There was also the stabbing scene.
Oh, really?
Was also one that they wanted them to cut down. They wanted them to cut down to just one stab instead of so many.
Julius Caesar. That's...
Is that you think that's what they were going for? Was Julius Caesar with that scene?
Did you not? They each needed... Okay, we'll get to that.
Okay. So before we get to that, let's go through a quick synopsis. This is straight from the back of the DVD.
Can I read it?
Yes, please.
Set against the backdrop of a transforming country, a young woman finds herself swept up in a radical plot to assassinate a ruthless and secretive intelligence agent. As she immerses herself in her role as a cosmopolitan seductress, she becomes entangled in a dangerous game of emotional intrigue, love, and betrayal. Was that really like on the back of the DVD kind of thing?
Yeah, that's like the little synopsis straight from the back of the cover.
Cosmopolitan seductress.
Right?
I was like, I feel like Ben made that up.
I didn't. I can't take credit for that. So let's start from the middle like this movie does.
Yeah, sure.
Because this movie kind of throws us right into the action, I guess, as much as you can call it that.
And it starts really from the end. You know, even though it's like kind of the middle, it's really the end of the movie is where it starts.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when I was watching this, I was completely lost. I had no idea what was happening. Suddenly there's just like bodyguards everywhere and there are German shepherds everywhere. And we're kind of in an old-timey China place, but I'm not quite sure what's happening. So my first thought is war times, probably World War II.
Mm-hmm.
But I still wasn't quite sure by that point. I don't know about you, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, the opening of this movie is very confusing because it gives you very little context clues for what's really happening, other than the fact that it's setting up a very tense situation.
Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of tension in that opening scene, and even though you don't really understand what's going on, you can feel that in the way that it's shot and in the way that the characters are talking to each other.
Yes, like the women are all playing mahjong together, and there are all these quick cuts to the different pieces moving and clicking. And it's like emphasizing the things that they're saying. And a lot of the things that they're saying is just kind of general women talk. I don't know how else to say it, but they're just women talking about stuff like their husbands and, oh, so-and-so gossip, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly this man comes in and he seems really powerful into this room, and there's all these looks. And I think Ang Lee does such a fantastic job focusing on the actors' faces and their reactions to things, especially nonverbals. And you could just feel this underlying tension throughout the beginning. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck is happening, but there's got to be something going on between some of these people because there's a lot. You could cut the tension with a knife kind of shit.
Yeah. Do you feel that them starting kind of at the end is successful in this movie? Because there are other movies that do this where it kind of throws you into the middle of the action and then backtracks to fill you in. Do you think it's successful the way that they do this?
No, I really liked it, especially when we got to the 4 years earlier part. I went, oh, we're going to figure that out. And I started putting the pieces together. And I like when movies allow me to process movies like that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I don't want to say too much because I can just tell that you're going to give me a really shitty movie example where they fuck this up because I haven't seen enough movies.
I mean, there are movies that do fuck this up. I don't have any examples.
Oh, but so you're like that. You'd be that kind of person, though. You know, you'd be like, oh, I'm going to give you this example and fuck up your answer.
I don't think there's a right answer or a wrong answer for. I think there are good examples of doing this and bad examples of doing this. And I think that this is a good example. I just wanted to kind of know what you thought as someone who doesn't watch as many movies as I do.
Okay.
Just kind of what did you think? I liked it. I liked that it was a lot of allowing the audience, like you said, to put the pieces together themselves. And it wasn't so much telling. It was something that Ang Lee does very well, which is showing. He's a very strong filmmaker in the sense that he's got a great eye for shots and creating scenes that have maybe very little said between characters, but you get the sense of what's going on based on the movements of the actors,
Absolutely.
the movements of the camera, and just how they're framed. Like you know everything about the power dynamic within that scene.
Oh,
just by the way it's shot.
I love how they don't even show Mr. Yi's face when they're all at the table. And so everyone kind of is looking slightly up at him. And you don't really get a sense of who he is, except he's very rigid and we're just moving along. And, you know, by the end of the movie, you know that there is a lot more behind his stoic character.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that even though I was completely lost, I loved the world I was in already. You know, we suddenly jumped to a coffee shop and we have tons of extras in the streets and all these shops and like a ton of white people. So I'm like, I don't even know what is happening. I haven't been to China before. And especially in like this kind of time period, I was very overwhelmed by just the amount of stuff to look at. But still, the main character, whose name is Wong, you know, she goes in the coffee shop, she calls, and it's very secretive. And suddenly there's all these people and they have their guns. And I'm like, what the fuck is happening right now? Mm-hmm. I do think that in that moment, I went, I don't know what's happening right now, but I fucking love it. I think that's word for word what I was thinking.
Yeah. And there's something I love in this first scene too. And it's something I had first seen in Crazy Rich Asians. And that is mahjong, which I had no idea how to play, but it looks like so much fun and so intense. And I wanted to learn how to play mahjong. So I actually looked it up how to play it because I was so interested. And apparently it's just a tile version of gin rummy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you're trying to get sets of 3 using the different tiles and shapes, and it can be matching ones or like continuous ones. Like they have different characters on them. Like one of them is bamboo, and if there's like a 1 bamboo, a 2 bamboo, a 3 bamboo, so they can be numbered or they can be matching. So I found that very interesting. I'd love to play mahjong at some point. I'm going to probably go out and buy a set of mahjong tiles.
Well, they were also really just such a great additional sound piece. I know I said that before, but just hearing the sounds of them and having that focus, and even just the way they were shot, they were beautiful. And it really showed the contrast between just like the poor world and the very rich world.
Mm-hmm. Which we get further introduced to through the backstory that we're given of Wong and her theater troupe.
Yes.
So what this movie essentially is it's this theater troupe who decide that they're going to become radicals and try to assassinate someone who is causing major issues during this Chinese conflict.
Well, I mean, we do find out it's World War II, essentially. We do find out it's World War II and that the Japanese are taking over China and infiltrating it. And we also find out that Mr. Yi, who in the beginning of the movie we see as this really prominent boss kind of mafia guy. I don't know. That was my impression of him right away. He ends up being like a magistrate or something like that. I don't remember his title, minister, something like that. But we find out that he is basically a traitor to China in the way that the theater troupe is thinking, where he's supporting the Japanese through torturing the resistance and sending money to the Japanese, doing all sorts of different things. And so I know you and I talked about being both in theater, trying to imagine our own theater companies trying to become assassins. And we're like, oh, because we're good at acting, we probably could act a certain way to, oh my God, I couldn't even imagine. I was like trying to think of even just like our own students in theater. And I'm going, nah, man.
Yeah.
No, that's not going to happen.
it did remind me a little bit of Team America, where the character is like the actor and he's sent in to be the like, just act your way out. It was all just very, very silly, but played very straight. Because this is based on, I'm going to say very loosely based on a true story.
Right. I don't know if the theater troupe is really involved in the real world depiction of what happened, but I know that the book is based off of a real woman who in the late 30s, early 40s was working for a resistance for China. And we don't know a ton about her other than it's very widely accepted that she was probably trying to lure men and become a mistress to sabotage and assassinate different people. And then the book itself is based off of her, but we don't know what extent is true or not.
Yeah, and even the director says that the original short story is a pure act of fiction. It's not true. So while the family of this woman kind of came out against this movie saying, like, this is not accurate, this is not what really happened, you're wrongfully portraying our sister as this promiscuous secret agent when that's not what she was. The director and I think the writer even came out and said, like, that was not my intent. Like, I may have used that little nugget of information as my starting point, but the story I built around it is not faithful to her story, and it was never intended to be.
Right. And I don't think anywhere in the movie it says that it's based off of something.
Other than the book.
Right.
Other than being based off the short story. Yeah.
Right. And I think when meeting the students, they're all university students and they're all in Hong Kong, it was such a nice way to kind of build this camaraderie in a very short amount of time that was very believable. Where going from the play and they're like, we're going to do a patriotic play and China will not fall. And we're going to get all of these people involved and hopefully donate to our cause. But then right after that, we cut to their cast party and they are so in sync with each other where it's so believable that I think Kwang is his name, is like kind of the leader. Kwang, the handsome one. I mean, they're all very nice looking, but like Kwang is the hot one. And he is like, this isn't enough. We're going to kill someone too. But it was like believable though. You know, I felt like their relationship to each other meant that they could support each other and find a way to make this possible. I don't know.
I agree, but I also think that there is a comedy version of this movie that exists somewhere in the world where it's like an improv troupe that decides they're going to overthrow some nation. And I would like to see that movie.
You would like to write that movie.
I would like to write that. I'd like to be in that movie.
No, that is definitely a Ben movie that you would create.
One thing that with them being a theater troupe that I didn't believe is this reluctance to experiment with each other sexually.
Okay. Well, it's also the 40s or late 30s. So I will put that one out there because I know that, you know, there's a bit of a stigma, especially in like the early 1900s and late 1900s. I also don't really know about like Chinese culture very much, but I have a belief that no matter what, 30s and 40s, I'm pretty sure no one was like fucking a lot.
Okay, because that goes against everything I know about theater troupes. But you're right. Culture and time period probably played a huge role.
It probably did. But I can see your point. But speaking of that, when the boy, and I think his name is Liang, he's the only one that's experienced in sex. And when Wang gets to the point where she almost lures Yi into her clutches, mistress style, they all leave the room. And I, for a minute, was like, I don't know what's happening. And then as soon as her friend, the only other girl, turns to her, I was like, oh shit. Oh God, does she have to teach her about sex? I didn't even think about that. And as someone who has had sex, I was like, I guess I never would have thought of something like that where there was such a thing as wives being virgins and pure before their husbands. And so she had to at least have somewhat of an experience before trying to seduce Mr. Yi.
Yeah. I would just like to be on the record also that I have had the sex.
You have a daughter.
Yes.
You have more proof than me.
Yes.
Anyway, I just, this movie made my heart break, especially when I found that Wang, who is playing Mak Tai Tai, which I found out Tai Tai is like a title for women, especially wealthy women. And so I felt my heart breaking for her at this point because she was risking her life constantly. And at the same time, she was really the only one doing anything. And I know that there was like a driver and there was like the guy that was pretending to be her husband and, you know, but she was literally the only person going out and doing something. And so she is acting as this character, constantly fearing for her life. And she comes back and she's sharing with everyone that, yep, he's going to definitely try to fuck me soon. Like, I almost had him. We better start thinking of our next move. And so she suddenly becomes a little less naive and kind of hits this, not blankness, but she kind of compartmentalizes things.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that right away, where she kind of becomes this split personality, where she becomes almost this blank slate of just kind of trying to get through things, versus Mak Tai Tai, her character. And then she's like very much that character. And so watching that split, it's kind of almost reminded me of like a bipolar disorder, which I know is not what was meant, but like that was the severity of what I was seeing.
Yeah, it was definitely a dissociative thing where she was disassociating with herself because she knew that she had to get this job done. I also find it very interesting that she was the only one who didn't stab the guy that ends up trying to come after them.
Right.
Because it maintains a level of innocence in her character by having her not commit that murder.
Right. And so, like, as we were talking earlier, I definitely had a Julius Caesar thought, because like they're all stabbing him. He's wearing white. Like, you can obviously see the blood. But you're right. Like, the reason they were all doing that is because, and they even look at each other like, you haven't done it yet. You need to commit yourself to this and kill this guy too. Even though he was already dead or almost dead, like everyone needs a turn at the stabbing. But I didn't notice that Wong didn't stab him, or I didn't remember. So that's interesting.
Yeah, because you were saying how she had done everything, and then it gets to that point and she's the only one who doesn't do it. So it's that interesting sense of like all of the people within that group feel like they have to stab this bodyguard to feel like they're kind of all part of the group and pulling the same amount of weight as Wong is for the cause.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the little details that I was noticing with Wong, especially in this first kind of chunk of her as the mistress, I love the little details that would happen. For example, she started smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a comment earlier by her friend saying that real artists smoke. And that, I don't know, it just really resonated with me. Not because I believe that or anything, but because as we were talking about this disassociation with herself, she was like, no, I am an artist. And so when I'm in character, I need to be that character. And so I smoke now because I'm an artist. I'm a true artist.
Well, and what's weird about this movie, too, is that disassociation happens around the time where the resistance fails and breaks apart for an extended period of time. So you get this sense where the character is kind of now lost in who she is and doesn't know what to do with herself.
Right. And then that's when we time travel to the present-ish. And we're in Shanghai, and she's staying with her aunt, I believe, at that point. And I felt like as soon as we hit 3 years later, there was a lot more visual of the presence of Japan and the presence of the war. Like, there were people dead literally in the street. There were lines of poor people everywhere, and they really focused on that. And it was showing that Wong is still poor, and she's still surrounded by the war, and she's just barely getting by, and she's on her own practically. And so I felt like it was nice getting back to who she was, but I always felt she was kind of lost. You know, she just kind of was, her eyes looked vacant, and the actress was incredible.
Yeah, she was.
You know, she definitely had like that innocent look to her when she was herself in this like middle chunk. But then as soon as she sees Kwang again, I'm so sorry. As soon as she sees him again, and he's like, hey, we need you to do this again. She does not even go back to who she was at that point. She is complete and fully Mak Tai Tai.
Yeah, and I feel like when the movie jumps to 1942, that's when the movie really started moving for me and started having a lot more forward momentum.
And why is that?
I think it's because the core of this movie, and when you title your movie Lust Caution, the core of the movie is going to be the romance that is forbidden. And it took so long for them to get to the part where Wang and Yi actually are together, or that sort of affair really starts in full.
Yeah, I guess it is like an hour and a half until they start like actually doing stuff.
Yeah.
But I will say the scene in the 3 years ago where they are going to the tailor and then they go and have dinner together, I felt like they set that up so well that it was very believable later that Yi was still obsessed with her and that she was able to easily swoop in to become his mistress.
Absolutely. And I do think, and this is my main criticism of this movie, is that it's too long. However, when you really sit down and think about it, there's not that much stuff that you can really cut out of this story
to that's still what I was
have
thinking
the
too.
same impact. The one thing I could think of that you could cut out is the sexual tension and the story beats that further the relationship between Wang and Quang. Because that ultimately doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't really lend itself to anything that Wang decides to do. Like, the ultimate decision that she makes at the end of the movie isn't influenced by that relationship with Quang. It's influenced by something else. So that part of the story I would cut down on, and that would include cutting down the scenes where Wang learns sex. Like, I didn't need that spelled out for me to understand. I would have figured out on my own that, okay, this person needed to figure out how to do this in order to seduce him.
I think that the initial obviously needed to happen of her learning how to do sex. That needed to happen because it was tragic. It was a tragic thing for her to go through, to have to commit all the way. But at the same time, I felt like one of those scenes wasn't enough for me to understand the tragedy of this. And I also feel like I completely agree to make this shorter and make it move a little bit faster. I think that's fine to cut that. And then also cut Wang and Quang's interactions, the romantic interaction. But I think that's where a lot of the tragedy stems from, where you see that Yi and Wang have this relationship that they weirdly fall in love with each other, even though we know that Yi is abusive and raping Wang multiple times over. But we see what could have been and what was lost, the innocence that was lost because of the war. And I think also we as Americans are so used to things being really tight and moving forward possibly, and we don't let things just sit and marinate and just wash over us a little bit to get a feeling more than just what's actually happening, just plot. And so there's a part of me that's like, yes, Ben, you are absolutely correct. If I wanted to cut some stuff from this and make this movie for Wesley, like I would cut this. But then there's this other part of me that sees the art and beauty that is the whole picture. Like, it needed those pieces because that is the full story,
Well, it's only the full story because that's a story that was given to us. Like, if they made a 4-hour cut of this movie, you could say the same thing. Well, that's the full story. If this is a 2-hour cut, you could say, well, this is a full story. So I don't necessarily buy that part of it. I also think that you brought up the rape, which is the first sexual interaction between Yi and Wang. And I think the fact that it is a rape scene undercuts the necessity to show her learning how to have sex. Because since it starts with rape, she didn't need that sexual skill in the beginning. She didn't need that experience. And we could have just intuited the fact that she learned sex as a result of the rape and the progression of their relationship without having that scene given to us where she's learning how to have sex.
Okay, so like originally the main reason that Wang needed to have sex is because she had never had sex before. And I know that there's this like this whole culture around like women having a hymen that needs to be broken on sex and that they need to bleed when they first have sex and that they were probably concerned about that. That is completely false. Like, yes, some women have hymens, but they get broken all the time with stupid things. So it's very like, I see what you're saying. Like the rape scene would have like not worried about that, but she still was a married woman. She was still like understandably was supposed to be having sex, but also learning how to have sex to continue to make yourself appealing to this person and to continue to lure him and seduce him was so important. She couldn't fuck this up. She needed to be strong in her abilities of sex to make sure, or at least like somewhat knowledgeable, to continue to make him want her in case something happened, you know? And so that's where I was thinking it didn't really undercut it, but I felt like it was so powerful to see after she was raped, she's laying on the bed, her clothes are completely ripped to shreds, and there is just the slightest smile on her face that immediately disappears because she has finally done it. She has broken down the walls. Like, she will take this beating because she knows that he will eventually be killed by the resistance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a smile of knowing that you did your job is kind of the way I interpreted her smile. Like she accomplished what she tried to do, which was infiltrate his bed, essentially.
Right. And it was so hard to watch him beating her and tying her up with a belt and her trying to just like get through it. You know, as someone who's been sexually assaulted before, I just was having such a hard time. But it needed to happen because Yi is such a horrible man, and we needed to see it. We needed to see that horror that she's going through. And so I think going back to the NC-17 part, I think that's where art can happen. But then later, we see their relationship weirdly develop into this love. And it's kind of that Stockholm syndrome a bit. But at the same time, you kind of wonder, Wong has completely fallen into this Mok Tai Tai character, and she might not be Wong anymore. She's completely this other person. So maybe this character of hers is completely in love with Yi.
I think you're right, Emily, because there's that scene where Wong is talking to Kwang and she's expressing this turmoil she's experiencing trying to carry on this relationship with this
scene.
Man she's planning to assassinate. It's my favorite scene in the movie.
Oh, me too.
I love that scene. But there's just so many lines within that scene that make you see that when Wong is with Yi, she's not Wong. She is Mok Tai Tai. And we're losing this sense of who Wong is. And even when she's talking to Kwang, you're still seeing a little bit of Mok Tai Tai. And the Wong that is there that you do see is one that is experiencing a sense of sadness and loss at what could have been, because she clearly wanted Kwang.
Yep.
And Kwang clearly wanted her. And that scene really hammers home that sadness that both characters are experiencing, where Wong is gone, Mok Tai Tai is here, and they can't be together because of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, honestly, the rape scene is so pivotal in the death of Wong. I think that in itself completely erases Wong from existence, and she is completely Mok Tai Tai from that moment on. And when she is in that scene talking to the resistance leader and talking to Kwang, I just was sitting there with so much emotion. There was a line that she said, and it's one of the few lines I actually remember. She's talking about she's just trying to get through this because at some point, you know, she's hoping that the resistance going to come in and splatter his brains all over her face or her body or something like that. And she says it with such a melancholiness where, yes, she knows that it's her job, but at the same time, she doesn't want that to happen, but she's trying to still get through it. You know, it was so powerful to me and just made me cry.
Yeah, I mean, you literally just stole my favorite line. Do you see that?
I just read it.
Yeah, that's my favorite line of the movie too, is where she's talking about how she's hoping that at some point, even after he's climaxed, that someone will come in and splatter his brains all over her. So yeah, that was my favorite line.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's one of the only lines I actually remember.
This movie is so well acted, especially from our three main people, which is Wong, Yi, and Kwang. The main character of Yi, Tony Leung, he is a very famous Chinese actor.
Yes, I did know that.
Yep. Known for working with Wong Kar-wai, who is a famous Chinese director. He directed movies like Chungking Express and In the Mood for Love. And In the Mood for Love is the movie that Tony Leung is in, and it's a phenomenal movie. If you like Lust Caution, check out In the Mood for Love. Very good. But he's also going to be in the new Marvel movie, the Shang-Chi, that's coming out here in September.
That's right. Yeah, that's really cool. And then Tang Wei, the woman that plays Wong, I'm pretty sure she was just like a random woman that they casted. And I remember watching an interview with Ang Lee, and he talked about she has a very classic Chinese look to her and had this innocence to her that even though you don't see that very often, that's what he said. But when she was acting, it completely flipped and she could do so much with so little. And that's what Ang Lee is known for. You know, he can just take such a small amount of a shot and his actors are able to work that shot with just the smallest details.
Yeah, sadly, as a result of this movie, Tang Wei was blacklisted by the Chinese government. Which
makes sense, but
also Tony Leung wasn't. So
sexism,
right,
sexism.
That's it. I mean, sad but true. But so we haven't really talked about the sex scenes, which is why this movie has an NC-17 rating, because there are shots within the sex scenes that you would not be able to get away with in an R-rated movie.
Absolutely not. There were balls. There were
balls.
Legit balls in these sex scenes.
Yes. And one thing that the MPAA hates is thrusting. So any sort of pelvic thrusting that is uninhibited, like not covered by a sheet or something, is a big no-no for the MPAA. So it's actually the thrusting that probably got the movie the NC-17 rating.
So then hang on, because I do have a question, because there's a very prominent sex scene that's in my brain right now, and that is the room.
Is it the room? Yeah.
I gotta know, is that rated R or is it?
No, that movie's rated R, but when you're having sex with a belly button, it's a little different. Like it's clearly, I don't know. It could also be the angle at which the thrusting is shot.
Okay.
But the sex scenes go on and on within this movie. But it's always in the service of the characters, and that's why it never feels gratuitous. Like, that is art that's being done.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just gratuity.
Right. And I think that even watching the sex scenes, there was never really a moment of me being uncomfortable with it. I just saw the beauty of these two bodies working together, and reading and listening to some interviews about how they had to set up the choreography for it was so tough on the actors and the people involved, because it took days to make it perfect and everyone was comfortable, but also just the exhaustion you get from trying to get what Ang Lee got. You know, it was just this perfect choreography of two bodies working together. And there were some sex positions that you would see and were not like the traditional sex scenes that you see in a rated R movie. You know, I think the only one that I could go, maybe we saw a little bit of it was like Amelie, or maybe Forgetting Sarah Marshall. But even then, you know, those were like glimpses and flashes of it. This was art. This was long, slow, passionate, lustful sex.
And the positions that were chosen to be shown are character-driven positions.
Yes.
They told a story of the dynamic between the two, and it's very well done. 100 hours of film they had to shoot to get those sex scenes. 11 days of shooting. Ang Lee said it was more intensive of a shoot than the choreography scenes he did in Crouching Tiger.
I know. Isn't that crazy? And those scenes are like insane.
I know.
I loved this movie. I didn't know what I was expecting going into it. I really had no idea about what it was about, other than what Brandon, our lovely guest and friend, told us. But it was a beautiful story. And I think that when we get to the scene where Mr. Yi comes in and Mak Tai Tai is there, and we're like, oh shit, now we know their relationship, and we understand that, all of this is riding on Mok Tai Tai and Wong. What is she going to do? And then suddenly she's at the coffee shop. We put all the pieces together. We already kind of knew what was going to happen. But now we know that Mr. Yi is fully in love with Mok Tai Tai. And she, weirdly enough, has also fallen in love with him because she is completely consumed by her character.
Which is why we get the ending that we do for this movie, which is the two of them at a ring shop, and Yi has given her this huge rock and this brightly colored ring. And at this point, Wong decides to tell Yi that he needs to go because there are people on the outside, and this has been a trap that they have set for him so that they can assassinate him.
And it's so subtle.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the tension that is her look and the way that Ang Lee just lets it sit and simmer for so long. It cuts to her and she's looking down and looking up and looking down in a way, and then it cuts to him and he's doing the same thing, kind of like happy in love but confused, and she is also kind of like happy in love and confused. And then suddenly she just barely gets out a small whisper of a word and he just bolts. It was honestly such a climax, of a movie. And I couldn't believe, I wasn't expecting that. I don't know what I was expecting, but I don't think I was expecting that.
No, I was expecting him to get assassinated. Like, that's how I thought this movie was going to end. I thought she was going to be successful, but instead we see her and her theater troupe killed. And that's how the movie ends.
Yeah. And that scene was beautiful too. Even just them all lined up, kneeling at each other, looking at each other. And then the camera just pans up. Wow. And we didn't even talk about the music in this. Fuck, the music in this was such a beautiful support throughout every moment of the film. It just kept it going and kept the emotions going. And I don't know, there was like nothing that I said should have been improved in this movie. Like, I know you said it's too long, but I went back and I watched it again. I loved it.
Yeah, the too long critique is really about making it more palatable for a mainstream audience, because
True.
I can see a lot of people looking at a 2 hour and 35-minute foreign movie and being like, there's no way I'm going to give this movie a shot. And I can understand that thinking. Like, that's fair. However, I do strongly suggest this movie. Do you do the same, Emily?
Absolutely. I mean, this is Ang Lee. If you love Sense and Sensibility, if you love Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, if you love Brokeback Mountain, if you love any of those movies, or if you've even just like have an inkling of liking any of those movies, you will not be disappointed with this one, because it is Ang Lee at his finest. It is a beautiful story, and he does drama so well. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful story.
And if the only Ang Lee movie you've seen is The Hulk, do you still suggest people see this?
Oh, fuck yeah, because you need some good shit in your life.
That's right.
And I know that, like, Ben, you didn't like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and you didn't like Sense and Sensibility, but at least you liked Brokeback Mountain.
It's not that I didn't like them. It's that they didn't rise to being the best pictures of the last 25 years. Like, that was what that was.
Okay,
Yeah.
whatever.
Sorry.
I'm still very salty about
Clearly.
that.
Get over it.
Fuck you.
Well, Emily, thanks for joining me today to talk about this wonderful movie.
Of course, Ben. And thank you for indulging me in wanting to watch this movie when I found out it was a 2007 movie and Ang Lee.
This was entirely you. This was not one of the ones we were originally going to do.
No, and I was like, hey, that's 2007. Hey, that's Ang Lee. We're going to fucking do it.
It's the only one that you said we had to do. So I'm glad that we were able to do it.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to us today. Please be sure to rate, subscribe, and share with a friend or two. And you can follow us on Instagram or Twitter at IDYP_podcast. Or you can email us at idrinkyourpodcast@gmail.com.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.